All right, good morning. Apologies for this late start. My setup crashed just as we're about to go live for the lecture. In the background, you can hear Tom typing. Tom's with us.
Hello.
No, it's not a problem. So Tom is with us this morning to talk about the exam. First, let's cover what's happening in the course. We've got the usual things happening. Our last lab exercises this week are happening. Well, and they're a bit special. They're to help you prepare for the exam and the exam format. No, so we don't want you to have any surprises when you open the exam. So we have the lab exercises as usual. We have a weekly test due Thursday. And do we have one more weekly test, Tom? Is there a last weekly test?
There was an issue where for a short while it said that the due date was later than it actually is. This weekly test is due on Thursday, though to be clear, if you have any issues because you thought that it was due later than that, please get in touch with us and we can look into that. This Thursday, what will happen is that we'll release another weekly test, but this weekly test is basically just another practice exam. It's just a practice exam that you get given marks for. So just like in the lab this week, you'll be doing a practice exam. We'll talk about that in a moment. The weekly test is basically another practice exam.
Okay, so weekly test, second last weekly test due Thursday 8 o'clock, and our last one coming out. And again, it's sort of a special weekly test to get you ready for the exam. Something else happening. Oh, the assignment. So we've all been having fun with an ADT, a Pokemon ADT, and Pokedex, which started out pretty simple and got pretty hard. So hopefully you're somewhere in the middle. You're wrestling with stages 2, 3, 4, and you have until Friday 8 p.m. I believe is the due date for the assignment.
Yep.
We're running help sessions. We're answering questions in the forum. So good luck with that. All right. So I hope you're enjoying Pokemon. It's I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's a well thought out learning venue. Pokemon is. All right. Now, I guess, what's in lectures this week? So there's no new content in lectures this week. We're going to talk about the exam in the first part of this lecture, and at any times left, we'll start recapping through what's in the course. And that recapping / revision will continue on Thursday. If you've got anything you think we really should revise, you can post it in the course forum, requests there or topics there maybe, and we might be able to add it for Thursdays. But chances are we're probably covering that anyway. All right. So
before you go on, there's one other thing that has happened, if that's all right, Andrew.
Yep.
So assignment 1 regular marks have been released. So that's a mark out of 80. The extension marks will be released shortly, probably by Wednesday. Apologies that they're slightly more delayed. We just prioritize getting the regular marks out because they include style feedback. So we'd strongly recommend go onto the course website, go and look at your submissions. And if you look under your submissions, you'll find there's a blue bubble next to assignment 1 that you can press. That will show you all of the style feedback that your tutor has given. So we'd really strongly recommend have a look through that. You can probably learn something about maybe what you should be doing differently or better for assignment 2. And the other mark, the extension marks would be there by Wednesday, would be my expectation.
All right. Excellent. So if you got that, assignment 1, marks are back, except for extension, which will be maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day if things don't go smoothly. But crucial, style feedback, how readable your program is, not how good it was at passing tests, how correct it was, very important of course, but how readable, maintainable, understandable it was by a human, assessed by your tutor. So we'd like to give you, that's crucial feedback for assignment 2. So have a look at that. All right. So let's start talking exam. Final exam. What's in it? How does it work? How does it get assessed? First, crucial is when. When and where. So the when is easy. Well, it's Wednesday the 18th, which would be 2 weeks tomorrow if my arithmetic is right. So it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. The exam it's nominally a 6-hour exam. It's a little odder format. It's specific. It's a very custom designed format for this course. So it's a 6-hour slot, which is a little unusual for UNSW exams. They typically either go at 3 hours or 24, but we've chosen 6 very carefully for this, and it'll be 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And let's be clear, as some of you are in other time zones, this is Sydney time. So you'll have to translate that to whatever time zone you're in, which is sort of we've got a very nice 1511 assignment where you work with time zones. Time zones are quite tricky, so but we'll leave that to you. If you're in another time zone, you'll be used to translating Sydney times to your time. All right. Where yeah, even if you're in Sydney, you're locked down and you can't come to campus. So the exam is completed, no surprise, on your own computer at home. Well, actually that's not quite true. That slide could do with some correction. Where it says on your own computer, you can connect to CSE servers, and I expect most students will actually do it on their own computer, but connected to CSE servers. In fact, you have to connect to CSE servers to submit the answers. But most students will do it the same way they've been doing labs, doing all the work actually on a CSE server connected by VLab or perhaps via SSH into one of the login servers.
And to be clear, that can include using VS Code, because I know we occasionally get questions about that, but that would just be using SSH. So yes, you can use VS Code.
And we will give you instructions in the exam about how to use VS Code. VS Code generates quite a load, so we have to give you particular instructions about how to share that load out. So we must remember to actually work out how that's going to happen as well. All right. Yeah, note that down, Tom.
Yes, absolutely. I know. So in the final exam, we also provided a big bubble that just had some troubleshooting instructions. I don't think that got included in the practice exam, but certainly it was just sort of a list of, if you've got a problem with XYZ, here is who you send an email to us, and here is what you do. I might add that back into the prac exam so people can get familiar with it, but certainly in the final exam there'll be instructions there.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, so things do go wrong. We'll talk about that. Now, while it's notionally a 6-hour exam, we actually expect it to take less than that. So that's one of the things we expect, is that it'll actually take you. Sorry, I'm just fiddling with something off screen. We're expecting it'll take you 3, 4, 5 hours. So we've deliberately chosen 6 hours. So if something goes wrong, you don't have to panic about having lost 5 or 10 minutes. It's not going to make a difference to your mark. So think of it more as a shorter exam with that window. All right. You can submit more than once. Your final submission will be marked. You're encouraged to submit early, submit often, in fact. Don't be that sad person that forgets to submit. So there's nothing wrong with submitting your answer twice. You're not sure you haven't submitted this? Well, just submit it again. You can practice doing that submit in the week 10 labs, but you won't be surprised. The submission is pretty similar to submitting the way you've submitted lab exercises and weekly tests. Communication during the exam. Now, we've had quite a bit of experience with online exams now, starting with a shock in term 1 last year, and we've found email is the most robust and reliable way to communicate. So before, during, perhaps after the exam, we will contact you via your UNSW email. This may be a broadcast email to every person in the class. It could possibly be a specific email to you. I'm not sure why, but we may specifically need to communicate with you. We might need specifically to communicate to you if you've emailed us. So please be set up to read your email. You might even be set up with an alternate way to monitor your email, like having your phone nearby with your email set up on it. So if your internet breaks or something like that, you have email access. Certainly, that's what happens when we have students who have crises, the NBN crashes or the power crashes or whatever, who get on their phone and email us, and we email you back. Right. So this is an open book exam. So the open means, yes, you've got access to all sorts of resources, but it's still an exam. What does that mean? It basically means you can't talk to any other student. In fact, you can't talk to any other person. You can look up stuff online. So any resource you can find online, you can use. But no, you can't go on Stack Overflow and say, here's this programming question I've got. Can someone give me an answer? No. So you can't ask for help, you can't talk to people, but you can look up any online resources. Well, when I say you can't talk to people, there is one key exception here. You can talk to us being the COMP1511 teaching team. How do you do that? Email cos1511.exam@csc.unsw.edu.au. So let's be very clear. You can't meet up with a friend and go, actually a lockdown. Let's suppose you're out of Sydney lockdown, or you can't meet up with 2 or 3 friends and do the exam together. No. You cannot do that. You can't do that virtually either. You can't go on, say, Facebook or some other messaging application and chat with each other while you're doing the exam. While you're doing the exam, no communication with other students, no communication with other people, no communication with anyone but me, perhaps Tom, perhaps Shrey, whoever we've got manning the exam contact address. Now, we typically have about 3 tutors manning the email so that we can get a prompt reply back to any questions you've got. All right.
Can I say a few things very briefly?
I was about to say, Tom, I'm sure you've got 1 or 2 things to add here about exam conditions.
Yes. The first thing I will say is, just so you know, we do have 3 tutors emailing, but one of the things that often happens during the exam is, for instance, some people will get the exam released at 1 minute past 1 or something, and we get a flood of about 100 emails. Or, for instance, something small will break, we'll fix it, it'll take about a minute to fix it. In that time, we get about 60 emails. So I would just encourage you, if you get to that position where something's broken, make sure you refresh the page first before you email us, because often it will just get fixed. But certainly please do.
Sorry, just to emphasize what Tom said, this comes up so often. So often the student will email us and say, oh look, I think question 4 is written wrongly. And we'll look, oh yeah, we've stuffed up there, we'll fix it. So
and then the rest of the day is spent emailing questions about question 4 being wrong.
But if you notice question 4 is wrong, first reload the web page and maybe it'll magically correct because someone 5 minutes before it asked us and we'd fixed it. So reload the web page, and then if it's still wrong, you can ask.
And certainly we'll make it really clear when we do that, like we'll put in red text or something like that. There was another question about, can we use code from the internet? The answer is it follows the same rules as an assignment, for instance. So if you are going to use code from the internet from before 1 p.m. on that day, if you cite that code, that should generally be fine. If you're not sure about it, then you can email us to make sure. But the one thing that you can't do is use code that was posted after 1 p.m. So for instance, even if there is code on the internet that says, exam question 1 solution 2021 term 2, you can't copy that because that would be plagiarism, because that could only have been posted after 1 p.m. But certainly if you're saying, how do I access a field in a linked list, and you go online and there's just a general reference, from the 1511 course page that shows you how to do that, that's fine. In fact, what I'd honestly recommend, don't even bother using most of the internet. Any of the notes that we've given you, that's great. You should use them. You should have your lecture slides ready. But if you go onto the internet, you'll almost certainly find that it's more effort than it's worth to try and find a piece of code that works, because you might find a piece of code that's actually broken and you just don't understand it.
All right, Max is noting some broken link in the Week 10 lab. Yeah, so I should note, by the way, everyone's under a lot of pressure at this time of year. Tutors have got lots of due dates. I know, for example, Tom and a couple of other tutors had a huge due date at like midnight last night. So we'll fix the web pages. So you just let us know about anything that's broken. Some of the tutors are really sleeping at the moment.
I'd be surprised if there was an error there. You might want to try that in private browsing and just double check it works there, because one of the things that the exam requires you to do is log in. So if you've typed in the wrong password, it might just be unhappy about that. But I'll go and double check.
If you email us about an exam problem, it's sort of the same thing about reporting any problem, saying it didn't work, and I tried A, I tried B, and I tried C, and they didn't work. They all did X, Y, Z. So let us know if things are breaking. And please don't panic. If you let us know immediately, we'll sort things out one way or another. It is a requirement, by the way, you contact us immediately if you have problems. You can't get back to us in 3 days' time and say, "Oh, my internet broke in the exam." No. You have to contact us immediately, telling us the internet's broken in the exam, and you have to actually provide evidence if it's something that's going to stop you sitting the exam. So that might be a screenshot, something like this, evidence of the failure of power of internet, things like this. And students typically use their phone to email us information. More likely what will happen is that we'll be able to talk to you and fix things up and get you back on the exam. If there's a major problem, you're going to have to go through special considerations. We don't give students supplementary exams. It's all done centrally at Unsw, and Tom had a clarification there.
Yep, there's another question there about using your own code from previous labs and weekly tests. It's certainly something that you would want to have a look at. You can feel free to do that. If you're copying code from anywhere else, I would put a comment in saying where you got it from, just because that avoids any question about whether there are issues or not. We generally find that there's not much reason why students copy things into the exam, because mostly what I would say is that the exams are questions that aren't just like copy paste from the labs. If they were, that'd be a bit of a problem. But certainly if you choose to copy stuff, we'd recommend citing it, just so that we know where it came from.
Yeah, strictly you have to do that. This course, it matters much less than elsewhere at Unsw. That would be a big thing. If you're doing a humanities course and you reuse text from another assignment, that's actually a big issue. In this course, much less so. But you just put a comment in there. You're open, we're open. It makes it all much. We know what's happening. It's much easier. So you just say, yeah, this is my Lab 9 code.
Yep.
Do we need to reference lecture slides and stuff? Well, students don't normally, but strictly yes. You'd put a little comment saying week 9 lectures or something like that. But it's what we're expecting. We put the stuff in lecture slides for students to use, so we're certainly very happy to see it happening.
But it's certainly not going to hurt for anyone to put in just a little note that, I got this from the week 9 lecture slides. And you might even find it helps you, because then when you go back to the exam an hour later and you say, this piece of code, where can I look up how it works? You might be able to find that useful. So.
Someone's cruelly mentioned Math 11131 server crashing during the exam. So it is possible we'll have problems like that. Just check your email. There might be an email saying, sorry, we're going to have to restart the exam. Yeah, we're not restart the server. The exam's finishing half an hour later.
I can assure you that last term when that happened, I was sort of spent that night between the Friday and the Saturday morning when the exam was last term being very, very scared. So we do take quite a lot of care in making sure that the systems that we've got are relatively reliable. To some extent, there are things that we might not be able to control, like if who knows what happens. I don't want to say anything lest I sort of jinx myself, but certainly we'll be very communicative with you if something doesn't work, and we'll try our best to avoid that happening in the first place.
I could mention the power going out in 3 suburbs earlier in term.
I wasn't going to mention that, but I was thinking it. Yes.
All right. So you'll receive an email at your Unsw email address. Make sure your Unsw email address is working. That may seem like it's a silly thing to say, but every year we deal with the odd student who redirects their Unsw email to to hotchick25 at gmail.com and gets the character wrong as a typo, and their Unsw email goes off into the void. Or sometimes we get this sad bounce. So please make sure your Unsw email address is working. Try sending yourself a test email, because you're going to get a specific link in your email to your particular exam, which we'll talk about in a little while.
And just as a note there, when we send out that email, we'll also send out a course notice saying we have sent out that email. So there's two channels, and hopefully if you don't get the email but you notice there's a course notice about it, you can fix it or come and talk to us.
All right. Yeah, we may have to change some of the command names slightly in the text of the exam. Don't panic. Just look at the exam. It has what the command to run. Don't type the one from the practice exam from memory. So in the practice exam, we have to do things slightly differently. Now, the exam link will only start working when the exam starts, which is 1 o'clock Sydney time. So wait until, if you've got an accurate watch, wait until 10 seconds past 1 or whatever to try accessing the link. You might even wait a minute or two longer, just to avoid the flood on the poor website. Alright, what does the exam look like? There are 20 short answer questions, and I'll show you the format of that shortly. We'll fetch the files and look at how you answer the short answer questions. So let's give you an overview first. 20 short answer questions, which are either multiple choice or a tiny amount a very, very short answer, few characters, perhaps a number. And there's 8 questions which ask you to write a program, or at least fill in a program. Maybe fill in a function in a program, just like lab exercises. Yeah, just like lab exercises. Or weekly tests. Alright, yeah, where it says revision there, think weekly tests. So the format.
There are also actual revision questions that we're releasing shortly, so they'll be similar to some of those as well, and we'll make it clear where they might be similar to a revision question.
So the format of these questions is not going to be a surprise. You've been doing questions all along that are like these practical questions.
And it's worth noting, based on the question that was in the chat, you don't need to go through and finish everything here. Much like the lab exercises, we've designed it so that those 8 practical questions in particular, question 1 and question 2 should be very approachable. They'll be very similar to the start of a lab, and in fact, as we'll get onto in a moment, you will need to complete question 1, question 2, and possibly 3 and 4 depending. Question 7 and question 8 are designed for the students of the course who've really wanted to get everything out of it. So the last few questions get harder, and certainly the last 2 questions would be comparable in some ways to challenge exercises. So we'll get through each question a little bit later, but I just wanted to flag, you don't need to answer all 8 questions. It's not like if you don't answer all of them, you don't pass the course. That's not how it works.
So I think my ideal thing is spread the entire class right out. So one student answers every question and gets right to the top, and everyone else is sort of spread out right from there. We won't exactly achieve that, but not many students are going to answer all 8 questions. So if you get 7 out of 8 questions, you should feel very, very happy. And don't look at the exam and think, oh my god, questions 6, 7 and 8 are really hard, I'm in trouble here. Most students are going to be looking at the exam, looking at the 6, 7 and 8 of the practical questions and thinking, oh my god, they're really hard. And most students will get maybe work through 1, 2, 3, 4, finish, get halfway into 5, or if they're doing well, they'll be starting on 6. So there's not an exam where 90% of the class is going to come out of the exam thinking, I did everything. No. It's an exam where maybe a few% of the class are going to come out saying, oh, I did almost everything. So it gives everyone an opportunity to demonstrate what they've learned. Now the short answer questions, there's one clever thing about the short answer questions, isn't it? You're sent your particular link to do the exam, but it'll have a different set of short answer questions for every student. So the 8 practical questions stay the same, I think. All right.
Oh, just to note on that, your papers change very slightly between students. One of the reasons that we also do that is because you are not allowed to share these papers, and certainly you shouldn't be sharing them. And so we've got measures in place to that. The questions themselves, I don't know whether they'll change, but it won't make a difference to you because you'll see your paper, and that's all the paper. That's the only paper you've got. But certainly, do not share your paper. And I think there'll be specifically instructions on the paper as well for the final to say, don't share this.
Okay. All right. Exam tips. No, I think we'll go to the actual exam and look at that now. Maybe we'll try and go to the exam. Well, that's fun. Oh, there we go. So this is the exact exam format. We fill in different questions here for the final exam.
It might be worth noting this is also different to the practice exam that you'll see. This is just an exam that we've created to show off in the lecture, so there's no spoilers here for the practice exam.
So we call it a 3-hour exam, and within a 6-hour slot. I think students often take more than 3 hours, but the idea is you don't have to panic about missing half an hour or taking 10 minutes out to go to the bathroom or eat some food or something like that. All right. So, if you deliberately, let me emphasize this word, you deliberately violate exam conditions, what happens is we refer to you to student conduct and integrity. We don't like doing this, but every term we do this, unfortunately. So please don't be in one of those sad cases that we have to recur to student conduct and integrity. Then their default penalty will be a grade of 0 for the course, and they can pursue more stringent penalties, including excluding students from UNSW. I would also note, last term we had problems with students with scholarships. There was at least one student with a scholarship who deliberately violated exam conditions, and the people who gave them the scholarship weren't very happy about that. I don't think in the end they kept their scholarship. Alright, so please, we don't do this if you make a mistake and accidentally violate exam conditions. We do this if deliberately. How would you violate exam conditions? Tom's mentioned sharing your paper, sharing the questions, or communicating with other students. Alright, so keep the paper confidential, don't share it with anyone. How to get help. Yeah. Oh, and here's our big thing, which we haven't talked about in the slides, have we? I might come back to that.
I think that was coming up after we talked about the prac exam. After we talked about the short answer questions. Excuse me.
All right, now let's give you some advice. We've deliberately given you 6 hours and a 3-hour window. Eat and drink. There are all these experimental results. Well, they test them on students because university researchers have students around for resources. So they've all been experiments done on students where they give some students cookies and other students no cookies, and they measure their blood sugar, and they can correlate exam performance with blood sugar. So anyway, have snacks available, take breaks, get up and rest your eyes. You'll actually improve your overall performance. We're expecting a lot of students will actually get to 3, 4, 5 hours in the exam and think, I can't really do any more. And that's okay. That's pretty normal. That's how we've designed the exam. So don't be worried if that happens. It's not a bad idea to take notes, to think about things, sketch out linked lists, have sort of concepts. You can have pages and pages of notes. There's no, it all has to be on one foolscap A4 shape. You can do all you want. A huge hint would be diagrams. So I'd have multiple sheets of paper or a big whiteboard or a second screen somewhere you can sketch out diagrams. Two sorts of diagrams. For arrays questions, I'd be drawing a box of arrays, elements, and keeping track, trying to graphically show what I'm trying to look at in what array element, or what I'm trying to store in what array element. Even more importantly, for linked lists, I'd be sketching out things with linked lists. Actually, on that point, I think I pulled up a... No, I lost it when my server crashed. Oh well. There was a lovely example in the forum where one of the tutors, Tam, had answered a student and drawn a beautiful diagram of a linked list, and suddenly the student goes, I understand that. And so the same applies to you learning about yourself. Sketch out linked lists. You want to know sketch out what happens when you delete. This was about deleting an item from a linked list. Sketch out what happens there. Maybe have that ready. All right. Yeah. So the exam on the day is going to seem like a big deal. There's no doubt about that. But honestly, in maybe a few weeks or maybe a year or two, you'll have completely forgotten what this exam was like. So keep it all in perspective. All right. Yeah. So what do the short answer questions look like? Generally, a classic one is, here's a bit of C, what does it do? Somehow, how does this concept work? Here's something, tell me something about it. Do you understand these concepts that are a bit crucial in the course? There are some examples in the week 10 lab of these, and I'll show. Well, no, I think the examples we've got in the exam we're pulling up are not realistic. So they could be, an example might be, here's a while loop. Does it terminate? Here's a while loop. How many times does it execute? Here's a piece of code including a while loop. What does it print? All possibilities there. How do you submit these? Yeah, this has been an issue. So we will give you a file called exam_mc.txt. When you fetch the files for an exam, there will be a spot to put your answers. Please do this carefully. Put your answers in this spot, which is between triple curly brackets. Only answers in the triple curly brackets will be accepted. Now I think, all going well, we should have a little bit of checking, auto test of sorts for the multiple choice. So when you submit, it checks to see you've got answers between triple brackets. You think we can manage that, Tom?
Yeah. So look, there's a bunch of different validations that are there. Certainly, if you miss out brackets or those sorts of things, you'll get errors. If you just type your input entirely outside the brackets, there's not too much I can do about that. It's a bit difficult to validate, but certainly...
but the validation can then say there's no answer for that question.
Yes. So it will print out the list. When you submit, if you don't put anything in the brackets, it will say that this thing is empty, and it'll say your submission is fine, but hey, just know that question 15 doesn't have an answer. Certainly also... hold on there. So please. So Tom and others put great effort into writing this clever code that checks this file and looks to see you've got answers in the right place. And then students don't read the output. So please, when you submit, read through very carefully. And when it says 15, no answer, I think I've got to go back. I've put the answer to question 15 in the wrong place. Sorry, Tom. Yeah, keep going. So the other thing that we do is, like, if you delete a question, so if you accidentally delete question 16 again, it will say, you don't have a line there for question 16. So read the output carefully, definitely. It will also tell you if your submission is okay or not okay, and if anything like, you've just deleted question 16 happens, it will say that your submission isn't okay, and it will stop your submission and be like, hey, make sure you check this thing.
Right. One of the biggest problems we had is people just not submitting the answers to this question. So they'll do the answers and then just not submit it. So please submit it. And if you're not sure whether you've submitted it, just submit it again. We even send out emails or something to students saying you haven't submitted it, and we still get people to don't submit it. So that's the biggest thing. Please go back and submit it. All right. Yeah, it's really weird. Students freak out about, have I got question 17 right or not? I don't know. Then they don't submit the whole thing to the whole 20 answers. So they freak out they focus on tiny little things with one question, and then don't submit the answers to 20 questions. Please do. All right. These 20 questions shouldn't take you too long. How you reckon? Half an hour to get through these? Half an hour to get through the 20 questions, Tom?
Half an hour seems reasonable. Might be a bit more, a bit less, but yeah.
I'd say half an hour would be fine. You reckon more like an hour? Maybe we'll say somewhere between half an hour and an hour.
Some of the questions are intentionally incredibly easy. So there are marks in this exam for knowing how to chuck something into a compiler and then run that program. That is something that there'll be marks for, but also some of those questions will require a little bit more complicated thinking about style or about concepts we've taught you. So there's definitely a range in those multiple choice questions.
All right. Well, that doesn't seem fair. You can go back to the lecture slides and reread the lecture slides and then answer the question. Or even rewatching the lecture videos. It's going to have to be triple speed or something like that, maybe, but you can do that. I think good exams. Well, it's hard to imagine you got to this university without good exam strategy. But good exam strategy would be to probably have one pass through these multiple choice questions, answer them, and then submit them. Let me emphasize that. Submit the answers. And then maybe if you've got time later after you've tackled 4 or 5 programming questions or whatever, come back and review your answers and maybe do a bit more. So don't spend too much time on them. Consider how many marks they're worth. Use your smart exam strategy that got you to UNSW and allocate time. All right. Yeah. Prioritize. Good exam strategy. Practical questions. Generally, they submit 1C file. I think they'll probably all be submit 1C file. There'll be an auto test. You might be given some code already, just like in lab exercise. The last few weeks labs, there's been a lot of that. You're already given code, framework code. You're given here. Oh, look, we want you to write this function. Here's a main that calls it. So yeah, it's going to be like lab exercises. You'll look at the question, you'll get the starter code, you'll fill in code, you'll compile it. So most students, as I said, will be working on CSE servers. You're not forced to work on CSE servers. You've set up a fancy computing environment on your home laptop. You can fetch the files from CSE, do the answer there, put it back to CSE, and submit it if you want. But most students will use VLab or perhaps the login service to do it. Auto tests are just tests. There's nothing that says, oh look, this student's passed 7 out of 11 auto tests, that guarantees them 3 marks. There's not really actually any point counting auto tests. Auto tests are there to help you, sure, they help you we think, oh, here's 5 common bugs we can think of. We want to make sure if a student's got one of these 5 common bugs, they know about it. So we set up auto tests that pick up any of these 5 common bugs. There's another reason for auto test is what I really hate is you get a smart student, yeah, knows their stuff, but then they don't read the question well and answer the wrong question. That's horrible on paper exams. You get a student who's answered the wrong question. You think, oh, they seem like they know how to write code, but they've answered the wrong question. So auto tests make sure you're answering the right question. So they give you feedback whether you're actually solving the right problem. So pick up common bugs, let you know about that. Make sure you're answering the right question. You've understood what the English says with the question. But no marks for auto tests. Now, unless you do something crazy, and having said that, students do crazy things, but unless you do something crazy, if you pass all the auto tests, you're probably getting a good mark for the question. You're probably even getting full marks for the questions unless you've done something crazy. But we don't use the auto tests in marking. We get a completely separate set of tests and run them against your code, and then we have a human marker look at it as well. So auto tests help you, but they're not your end goal. Your end goal is submitting a correct answer that's going to pass all the tests we look at. And if a human marker looks at your code, they think, ah, yeah, that's good. So you could fail all the auto tests. You could have a tiny mistake in your code and fail all the auto tests, and then the human marker could look at it and say, oh yeah, there's just a tiny mistake there. That's 1 mark off. They get 9 out of 10 or 9.5 out of 10, or sometimes even if it's a really silly thing, they might even give you 10 out of 10. So the human marker will be there and judge what sort of progress you've made to solving the problem. So it's not a thing of you've passed 0 auto tests, you get 0. No. If there's just a small error in your code and the if statement that's flipped the wrong way or something like this, but the really important logic's there, you'll get most of the marks. Assessed by a human. Let me emphasize that. Marking by a human. Now, it's nice to take the human out of the equation, so we will run automated tests on you, and that the human marker can see, oh look, we ran 27 automated tests on the code and it passed every one of them. They're not going to be in there picking out problems. So, but if it's partly working, it's certainly a human assessing how it's partly working. So please don't be that student who posts on the forum, oh, my code passed 3 of 10 auto tests, I should get 30%, or my post passed 7 auto tests out of 8. Why don't I get a big mark? A human has looked at your code and seen how much of the problem you've passed. There is an issue, by the way. If you think about it, you can write a series of if statements. If there are 10 auto tests, you can write 10 if statements and pass 10 auto tests without going anywhere near tackling what the problem really is. So we have a human marker look at it. To do it, one thing by the way, to do it fairly, we get the same human marker, if we can, to mark all the answers for one question. We don't have human markers to do exam at a time. They do just a question, so they mark it consistently. Sometimes there's so much work marking one question, we'll have 2 human markers, but then we'll get them to check with each other and mark it consistently. So we want fairness, so we get them to do every question 6, and they'll have a marking scheme, and they'll mark every question 6 to this marking scheme. Alright, so you all get assessed to the same standard. Yeah. Alright. Actually, should we take a break now and come back to discuss the hurdle, Tom? It's 2 minutes past 10.
Sure, sounds like a good plan.
Now, if you've got questions in the exam about the exam, tuck them in the chat, and we'll work our way through them after the break. But let's take a 5-minute break now and come back to things. All right, everyone, we're back. So there's a question in the chat about about the animal that. Oh, wait a minute. All right, we're back, and now we have audio. Hopefully, yes, we do. I'm leaving the animal that I use as a sort of a what's the word? It's equivalent of a lock screen on the phone. I'm sure people who work in video have an equivalent term for it. He's a yellow-footed antechinus, and I know it's a male too, because they're an interesting animal. Particularly, they're an Australian marsupial. He may look cute, but he's incredibly savage and will try and kill you if given an opportunity. Fortunately, as he weighs about 10 grams, he probably can't do it, but wouldn't stop him trying. They live only for 1 year. So there are plenty of plants that do this and live only for 1 year, but they're a mammal that does this. So about this time of year, almost exactly this time of year, males mate and then die. So they rush around looking frantically for love and then die a week or two later. So he's looking not to kill me, but he's deciding, am I a female yellow-footed antechinus? I think he's decided I'm not. But so you've got to walk within your LGA, so you'd have to be in one of Sydney's very leafy suburbs, but occasionally in some of the northern suburbs of Sydney you'll find a dead little male lying there who's perished after his search for love. So that's sort of a different topic for us. Alright, let's push the antechinus off the screen and go back to talking a more germane topic to COMP1511 hurdles. We do have a sort of a minimum competency standard we want to see you demonstrate in the exam to say, look, I've understood this course material, I've understood the most important parts of this course material, I'm ready to go on to the next step in my computing journey, which might be COMP1521. That's the course I'd recommend for most of you. Some of you are engineers and the next course you take is COMP1521, but it's saying I'm ready, I've understood the important parts of this material. So we want you to demonstrate this with 2 answers in the exam. We say there's 2 crucial sorts of programming that you need to have understood. One is you need to be able to work with arrays. Now, working with arrays, it involves understanding if statements, while statements, ordinary variables, functions maybe. So it's not the only thing that's involved here, but we say you need to be able to put all of this together and work with an array. So one requirement is in the exam you can demonstrate you can work with arrays. The second part, and almost always this is it, this is the hardest thing, is you don't need to demonstrate you can work with linked lists. So you have to satisfactorily answer a question where the answer has to be with a linked list. So to pass the exam and pass the course, you have to demonstrate this. How do we specify this? A mark of 50% on one arrayed hurdle question, a mark of 50% on one linked list hurdle question. You've got to do this. Now, the array hurdle questions will be 1 and 3. So questions 1 or 3 you've got to get 50% of. So you can get 50% on question 1, and you've passed the array hurdle. And that's where most people will do it. Some people might just have a blind spot for question 1 and they'll get 50% on question 3. That's okay. They've passed the array hurdle. You're not through yet. You've also got to show you can program with linked lists, and you can do that with 50% on question 2 or 50% on question 4. Do both of those and you're right. So what does that suggest to me with the exam strategy? The exam strategy said the first thing with the exam you should do is look at questions 1 and 2. They'll be the notionally easier one of them. It's okay if you can see how to do question 3 and 4, that's okay, but almost certainly questions 1 or 2 will look easier to you. You need to put serious effort into those and make sure you've got those covered. That's the biggest thing in the exam, is get question 1 and 2 of the 8 prac questions and getting them solved or close to solved, so you've got 50%. If you can't do that, if you can't get 50% on question 1 or question 3, you can't pass the exam, you can't pass the course. If you can't get 50% on question 2 or question 4, you can't pass the exam, you can't pass the course. Now you're saying, well, Andrew, but I've done my maths, I've got such good marks for everything else, I reckon I'll still get to 63%. It's 63% you'll get, but you won't pass the course. There's a grade called UF, which means your marks above 50%, but there's some crucial part of the course you haven't understood. We're far from the only course that uses this. In physics they might use it if you understood the theory, but not the lab exams or things like this. So
I do just want to be really, really clear about that. Please don't be worried about this. Like, obviously the hurdle is there, and I understand that can make some people anxious, but it's really important to note that like almost everybody in the course, like a very, very, very large percentage, passes the hurdles, and where students don't pass the hurdles, it's almost always that they also don't pass the course just on marks alone. Like, it would be single digits of people probably who pass the course, and maybe what they get is like a 51 or a 52, but then they don't pass the hurdles. And the reason that the hurdles are there are because we just want to make sure that you leave the course with an understanding of arrays and linked lists. So please don't feel like, this is something massive that I've got to be really worried about. It isn't. If you are going through the hurdles and you're feeling really stuck and you're like, oh my goodness, question 1, I didn't quite get it working. Question 3, I didn't quite get it working. Just remember, just submit it, because there's every chance that what happens is you submit it and we look at it and we say, well, that's actually 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10. So just so you know as well, like when we're looking at hurdle questions, we are very careful about how we mark them to make sure that, we don't accidentally make somebody not pass the hurdle. So please don't get too worried by this. I know it can seem stressful, but it's really more just a tool for us to make absolutely sure that everybody leaving the course has that competency, and honestly also to make sure that people are doing the exam. But please don't get worried. I just want to say that very loudly, just so everyone's clear.
So I will actually go back and look at all the students who've passed the course on marks but haven't passed the hurdle. So anyone who's got 53 but hasn't passed the hurdle, I'll actually check their exam and look at it and make sure that that's really correct. And that, as Tom says, it won't actually take me that long to do that, because it's going to be like 5 students, 10 students at most that are in that category. But still, this is the.
Go on, please.
But still, this in your exam strategy. This should be, get this out of the way, get in, get this done, and then you'll be breathing a sigh of relief and can relax a bit and think about where you're going to go from there.
And if we're being totally honest, I mean, like, a normal exam strategy, even if hurdles didn't exist, would be to get the easy marks first. And these hurdles are going to be the easiest practical questions. So certainly I'd be wanting to look there. There's a question in the chat about, can I pass if I get 25% for question 1 and 25% for question 3? No, you need to get 50% in one of these questions. So 50% in either Q1 or Q3, and 50% in either Q2 or Q4. But again, it's pretty rare where we see students not getting close to full marks in these questions. You'll see this when we get to the questions themselves. If you've done a little bit of preparation, a little bit of practice, you shouldn't find these questions terrifyingly hard. We don't intend to make it that way. We don't want to just fail people out of 151 for no reason. We try not to be evil people here.
So, by the way, one of the things this is good. I mean, if passing COMP1511 was dead easy, everyone passed, then then you've got less to say. So part of why we assess students, why we document this, is so that you can prove to people, I've done this, I've understood this stuff, I've passed COMP1511, and that's also why we have degrees. So you can say to an employer, I know this stuff. And the employers know UNSW tests this stuff. So, and they come to UNSW for that reason. All right. Some tips for the practical questions, the last 8 questions. Read the question very carefully before starting. Scan the whole exam. Yeah, you might scan questions 7 and 8 pretty quickly, but then pick the easy ones and try and do them in order. So you'll want to get question 1 and 2 first, and then after that try and go in order, and don't spend too much time if you've misjudged a question. If you look at question 8 and think it's dead easy, perhaps you haven't understood it. But if you look at questions 3 and 5 and think, oh, I think I know how to do question 5, and question 3 looks a bit tricky to me, yeah, maybe that you're right there. But then if you don't spend 2 hours on question 5, be smart about this. Yes, debugging and testing will be important. Yes, that's a good thing. We want to assess what you've learned about debugging and testing. Some students sort of have a scattergun approach to answering questions, which I think might work on courses or subjects they've taken in school, where it's best to put down a part answer to every question and then come back and add some more or something like that. It doesn't really work for a programming exam. It's better to be sort of completely solving questions and then moving on. So there's not much point writing 5 lines for question 8, 5 lines for question 7, 5 lines for question 6. Your time was better spent completely getting question 4 working. Yeah, there's no point counting the number of auto tests you passed. So and an answer is definitely not better because it passes 7 auto tests instead of 5 out of 10. No, it's how far you've got to solving the problem. And as I've said, you could make a couple of steps towards solving the problem and be passing no auto tests. A human marker will look at this. All right. So you in this week's lab, you've got quite suitable questions 1 and 2. And they'll be pretty basic sort of things, very analogous to things we've had in standard lab exercises. The first linked list question will not involve changing the list, I think it's safe to say. So inserting or removing from lists is harder. So the first linked list question won't involve the harder linked list operations. You've done a lot with 2D arrays, so the first question might involve 2D arrays. So question 1 might involve 2D arrays, but question 2 won't involve the harder stuff with linked lists. Might involve ifs, scanfs, all the sort of standard C sort of stuff. Oh, there's a stray black slash there, but so here's an example question 1. Loop through a 2D array and print out the even lines. So you might be given a main function that actually does the input, does the scanfs, and calls even lines with a 2D array. And this is showing the example. So you'll be able to test it, give it these sets of numbers. You hit Control D, and it should print out the rows in the array which have exactly one even number. Sorry. So try and read what the problem is exactly, but we have auto test to help you if you've misread the question, and we have examples showing you what happens. If one of these looks weird, yeah, it's possible. Sometimes we stuff up there. We often have 2 tutors read the paper, and we still have slight typos there. But as I've said, if you look at this and think, oh, I don't think that example's right, reload the paper would be your first thing. Maybe another student's already spotted that and we've fixed it. Alright, so that sort of thing, yeah. Function takes an array as input, does something. In this case, loops through the array, and if a line has an exactly one even number, prints it out. That's a pretty good example. We shouldn't have given you that one. That would have been a good exam question. Maybe it's an old exam question, I don't know. That would be a good exam question. So that's question 1. What would be a suitable question 2? Yeah, there's a nice question 2. Again, we'll give you a main function that gets the numbers from the command line arguments, and puts them in a linked list, and calls your function, and your function's got to calculate something. That would be a good question 2. In this case, it's print the difference between the smallest and largest numbers in the linked list. Yeah, again, shouldn't have shown you this. That would have been a good question 2. So, yeah. It's not impossible. You could be given 2 linked lists. I think we had some lab exercises like that said, give me the number, find a number. Well, but probably just one linked list for this question, I would think. Yeah. Could be two linked lists. Could be given a question which is, print numbers in both linked lists, numbers in neither linked list. I don't know. So I'm hoping you'll dive into the exam, code, you'll get question 1 out, you'll move to question 2, code, question 2, you'll get question 2 out. Unless you know something crazy, if you've passed all the auto tests for question 1 or passed all the auto tests for question 2, you've passed the hurdle. Now, let me repeat that, unless you do something crazy. So if you code in all the auto tests effectively, and your code breaks on anything else but the auto test, that's not solving the problem. But if you're sensibly solving the problem, I'm hoping you'll be code this up, pass the auto test, submit, breathe a sigh of relief, code this up, pass the auto test, submit. You'll be right. And then now's your chance to just show that you really know your stuff. Harder questions. They might involve changing the arrays, putting stuff in arrays, shuffling stuff about. They might involve deleting from the list, inserting into the list. The harder operations we've got. Format pretty similar to questions 1 and 2, but just harder. Questions 5 and 6. Yeah, we're starting to get a bit towards the challenge exercises, or perhaps a bit more towards what you've covered in the assignments. You need to write more code. Questions 3 and 4 a bit harder, but honestly it's not going to be a lot of code. It'll fit on a screen for sure. Questions 5 and 6, yeah, might not fit on a screen. You might be writing 20, 30 more lines of code. Might involve use of malloc and free. Might check for memory leaks. Might use an abstract data type. Yeah, getting on to all the more advanced topics in the course are possible here. Question 7 and 8, yeah, who knows what's in questions 7 and 8. Think challenge exercises, think hard, think you'll have to really, it may be a sort of problem you haven't seen before. Yeah, it's for you. If you want a HD, here's your chance to say, I deserve a HD. There might be less auto tests there. You might have to think more about it. You might have to figure out more about the problem. That's all fine in these questions. So don't tackle these questions until you've got the other questions working. There's no point going on to questions 7 and 8 until you've sorted out the other questions. I wouldn't be surprised if most of the class doesn't even get to question 7. Alright. Should we look at the exam? Yeah, let's go back and remind ourselves of what the exam looks like. If I can find it. There for sure. Well, that's a little sad. There was an exam there. Tom's broken the exam. I think Tom's not saying anything because Tom's probably
Yes, I think that may be what's happened. Give me one moment. I'll just double check why that's happened. There was a bug report in chat which I was trying to fix, and I'm hoping that hasn't also gone ahead and removed.
I'll leave you fixing the exam there. Well, preparation, yeah. All right, one mistake I see, there are students who, have been working hard all the way through the course and, struggling to keep up with everything. And if I said, here's a 60 pass, they'd say, yay, and take it and rush out the door. All right, if you're that student, this course has been a real challenge for you and you'll be happy just to pass. The mistake I see students like that make is they go too far into the advanced material trying to understand all of that. Whereas they really should be just exploring every possibility they can with the sort of stuff you're going to see in questions 1 to 4 and not worrying about questions 5 to 8 at all. So any sort of revision question you can do, go through every tute question, pull it apart, put in printfs, any basic topic revolving around arrays and linked lists, make sure you understand every line of all the basic examples, all the standard examples with that. change the program, change the if statements, make sure you get as many of the questions you can do, treat them as exam questions and do them yourself. Get practice at sketching out things with diagrams. So the more time you can spend on this, the better. But you've got to understand both arrays and linked lists.
I'm imagining if you refresh that page now, it should work if you force refresh, I hope.
Well, we'll find out. Not so far. No, I'm still getting a 403. All right. So, yeah, character strings, pointers, struct, memory allocation. These are things that are all good to understand, but if it's the difference between passing and failing, arrays and linked lists. If it's the difference between pass and a credit or a distinction, yeah, all of these things. If you're thinking, I want a distinction or maybe a HD, yeah, getting it, abstract data types, multi-file projects, and recursion. But if you're struggling just with linked list concepts, there's no point reading about recursion and thinking about recursion.
Okay, I think I found the bug and I think I fixed it. So
all right, Tom's
third time's the charm, as they say.
Tom's fixed the very last bug, so that's a programmer's joke, by the way. There's never a last bug. All right. Exam hurdle requirements. So you'll scroll down to the exam. Oh, fetching. Oh, look, here we go. All right. So there'll be instructions to start the exam. Yeah, which should have that might be slightly different to that. It should have a -m flag on that for safety. So it lets me try that. If I can go there. So, well, I can do it here anyway. Yeah, that might work. I'm doing it in the live. Actually, no, I won't do it in the live directory. I'll do it in my. So I'm told to say, look, dear. What was it? Sample exam and CD sample exam. This time for sure. Oh. Alright, I can't cut and paste. Why isn't that not working? Yeah, don't panic. If you mistype things, just don't panic. That's the other thing. We get lots of things from students who got in the wrong directory, and so they've started panicking. Their brain is frozen. Now there'll be a command to fetch the files for the exam, which will be something like 151 fetch exam. It'll be in the exam paper. And for this one, I've got something slightly different. I've got a CP minus R, because just as we haven't got it properly set up for this. But you'll be told a command to fetch it, and I'm going to use this one for this one. All right. Sorry, I've put this window in a different place to usual, so I'm forgetting where it is. Why me? All right. We'll get there. That's prac exam. So you'll run an exam, a command like 1511 fetch exam, and suddenly you'll have a lot of files. Except I can't read the files. That's a bit sad. Did you want to chmod the files directory, Tom?
Done. Try again.
Oh, there we go. All right. Oh, and the files have gone. Oh, I've done that wrongly. Yeah, no, it still goes in the file. It's all right. There we go. So here I've got files. You may have more files for your exam, but I've been given this. Oh, so I can look at the multiple choice file. What a good idea.
Yeah, so I can set that up. Also, while you're going into this, I'll just mention quickly, there was a question in the chat with regards to access to sample exams. This week's week 10 lab is a question 1, 2, and 4, and then there's also challenge exercises in this week's lab that are question 7 and question 8 from old exams. In the where else are there questions? In the weekly test this week, there will be a question 1, question 2, and a question 4, as well as some more revision multiple choice questions. And then in the revision exercises, which will release later this week, there are also some examples of past different questions, and we'll make it really obvious so you can say, oh, like this question used to be a question 3, and you can maybe go and do that question for practice on question 3.
All right, so here's the multiple choice one. So I look at the exam paper and I put my answers here. So it says, what would this thing print? And I can go, it will print, hello Andrew. Or what issues would this have? It would catch fire. Now the answers are likely more precise than what code should go in the return 42. So there will be short answers of a few characters that you're meant to type between the braces. Only type between the braces. When you're done, save, and then submit it. Well, you're about.
So I'd run the auto test here because the auto test should pick up some of the issues that you've got in there, Andrew.
How do I run the auto test?
Should be able to run 1511 auto test -prac exam and then space prac_MC because you're testing the
multiple choice.
Yep. They're not all multiple choice, but we just call it.
It says my submission is okay. And then I would then submit it normally, which would be give CS1511. But the exam will have the exact commands to run. So then I'll run a give command. Please, please, please do not forget to submit it with give.
Yep. Now it's worth noting
Yep.
for some questions here, there may be extra validation. So it might. So for instance, for question 2, we might actually say, hey, question 2 can only be one of the letters A, B, C, or D. And so you might even get an error there saying it would catch fire is not an appropriate response to this question. It's not an auto test because if we told you the answer was B, it wouldn't be a very good exam. But we'll tell you it must be one of A, B, C, or D.
So if the question is expecting just an integer as an answer and you give something that's not an integer, it'll say, no, we're expecting an integer for that question. How would you code up something like that? Well, what you would do is do COMP1511 and learn about regular expressions and things like that. All right, and enough advertising for COMP1511. All right, so you get this empty file where there'll be 20 spots where you'll put in an answer between the braces for questions 1, question 2. Some of them will be easy, and you just put A, B, C, D, E, but they could ask for a number, they could ask for things, but it's going to be something pretty simple there. Yeah, you don't have to worry about an extra space or something like that, but put it between the braces. Don't delete lines from this file. Don't muck about with this file. Just put your answer in that file. Alright, so that's the mc.txt file. Well, let's have a look in q1. No, that's not what I'm going to do. You might practice your gedit technique if you're like me and a real klutz with gedit. Alright, so here's a classic sort of exam question. So read through the file carefully. It says, oh look, put your code here, you must change the next line. Yeah, alright. So I'm swapping that out for something that computes max rows sum, and I'll read that and return the maximum sum of the row in the 2D array, and hopefully that accords with what the exam paper says for question 1 as well.
I think this because it's a sample exam might not quite be the same, but certainly The only thing is, I think the changes that I made during the
that's
during this
okay.
live stream have messed with it. But yes, so the exam paper will have questions, and the practical questions will line up with them. Yes.
All right. So for your programming convenience, we've given you a main function. In general, don't change these main functions. It's not going to get marked. All right. So you might want to if you write your function here and it doesn't work with this main function and you change it to another main function to make it work, that's bad. Your code should work. We're giving you a main function that does some simple calls. It should do the right thing for those simple calls. It's possible when you're debugging you might want to add extra calls and do extra stuff. Yeah, that's okay. But changing this main function so it works with your code, that's bad. Because why is that bad? We just test your function. So if you add another parameter here, if you add int extra parameter and down here put the extra parameter and now your function works, that's bad, because we'll go to test your code and it'll break.
So the auto tests would pick that particular error up. So
I've seen students do weird things to get around that as well.
Okay.
But yeah, so if you start doing weird and crazy things, really you should be asking us. So I've seen students submit 3 extra files to get around the auto test, telling them that, no, they're not answering the question. So all of this should be simple. You should just fill the code in here and then it should work. So these early questions will ask for a function. Just put your code there and all will be right. We don't test the main, no. In fact, you could even submit it without the main and the auto test would work and everything would work. But alright, so that's an example question 1.
Might be good to look at the paper for question 2 and question 4 rather than looking at the files, just so that you can see both what both look like.
Alright, so let's flip to the paper. I remember, there we go. Alright, so here's an example question 1. What does that print? No, it doesn't print hello Andrew. That's disappointing. Alright, and we'll show you it being run. Here's a classic one. Sorry, my annotation is broken today. So we typically put this on things saying it compiles. Don't tell us it doesn't compile. It compiles. If you think it doesn't compile, you're confused. But there are still students who go ahead and say, no, DCC will say syntax error line 5. And we're thinking, why? We told you. So if you're 100% convinced that it says DCC will produce an error, then email us. We put these in here for a reason. We don't want you getting confused and thinking there's an error there. It's a bit because why? Because it's hard for humans to read code as precisely as a compiler. So we're a bit worried that this question is about you understanding a while loop, and you'll think, that's a syntax error, somewhere else in the code. So we put it in. We make clear that there are no errors. Read the question, believe the question. If there's something inconsistent in the question, you let us know. Also, if there's a runtime error, we don't want you to, your memory of how does an initialized variable print out, for example. You don't have to, recapitulate what happens there. You can just write error. All right. Another one. Which of the following? So this is one Tom was talking about. I have to put A, B, C, or D as the answer. You don't have to put the rest of it. In fact, you have to put any a subset of them. So you can put A, C, or D. All right. Read the question. Read it carefully. And here's the last example. What should you put there for your code there? I think my answer was wrong there as well. All right. Another classic one is students get freaked out about new lines and things like this. We won't be tested. It's a bit weird putting new lines in your answer in mc.text, so we won't be asking for that sort of thing. All right, Prac Q1 for the arrays hurdle. A main function which reads values in an array and calls Prac1. So we've done the scanfs for you. Oh, well, actually, that's lying, isn't it? Actually, our example code put it in there directly. So for your testing pleasure anyway, we set up an array one way or another. We might do it with scanf. In this case, we've just used an initializer. We set up an array for you and call your function. Oh, a classic mistake here would be a student get confused and think, oh, I've got to read the array in, and they put scanfs and printfs and scanfs in there, or they put printfs in here. Think about what the function's supposed to do. This function doesn't scanf anything, doesn't printf anything. Array in, number out, that's your job. So that would be one of the biggest student mistakes. They think, oh, I'm going to read the numbers in and I'm going to do this or do that. Read the question carefully. It will tell you what's happening. So this is a function which returns the largest value in the array. Sometimes down here we'll put extra qualifiers saying don't do this, don't do that, read them. Here's the code to auto test, here's the code to submit. I don't think these may not work for these particular things, but for the final exam they will. Please, please, please don't forget to give. All right. So you hit the exam, you might read all the questions, but you dive into question 1. You've got to get past the arrays hurdle. Question 1's the easiest one to do that on. You'd solve this. Hopefully it won't take too long and you'll be right. Then you'd move on to question 2. You've got to get past the linked list hurdle. Hopefully question 2 is for that. And this is a classic sort of question 2. Write a function. It takes the head of the linked list and gives me back something. In this case, something is an int, which is the number of elements divisible by 17. We'll give you an example of what the function does. But again, for these questions, you're not expected to scanf anything. You're not expected to printf anything. You're writing a function, given a linked list, returns a number. Yeah. When it says do not change this main function, if you want to change it, you've misread the question. So we've given you a main function for this one. Let's have a look.
You might not want to look at this one. I think it might have the wrong question inside. And also, just given we've got 10 minutes left, it might be good to move through.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move through some other things.
Yeah.
All right. It's possible for questions you won't get any code. It's almost certainly for questions 1 and 2 you will get code. You might get code. You might get told to use particular structs. These later questions you probably won't get given code. You'll be expected to write whole programs.
Even if you're not given code, we'll still give you an empty file. The file will just say this file has been intentionally left devoid of content, and maybe it's got a hash include or something.
All right. Please use the same correct file name. That will cause. The final exam apparently will come with memes. You can turn off the meme by scrolling to the bottom.
In fact, the memes start off. So you need to read through
No,
the paper.
they're opt-in memes apparently. So if you like memes, you can opt in by scrolling to the bottom after so you can then click on the button to get friendly memes.
And I won't guarantee that they're memes. There might be other things in there as well. We get the tutors to help out with that as well. So
there may be pictures of tutors' pets.
They also happen.
All right, so we've already described how the marking happens. Everything gets checked by hand. But we base most of the marking on automated tests. So if your code works through all the automated tests, you'll be right. If not, a tutor will then look and see what progress you've really made. and that you could fail all the automated tests and be solve 95% of the problem, and you'll get a mark like 95%. You could be passing a lot of tests and not really made progress, and you'll get a mark reflecting that. Results, yeah. Well, we may be able to release some provisional results before you get them in my UNSW, but marking of this exam is a gigantic undertaking, so it'll be at the end of the exams period. Assignment 2 marking will also, we'll get it back to you when we can, but it's possible you won't have certainly the later stages of assignment 2 until well into the exam period. Alright, UNSW has a fit to sit policy, which basically means you can't be sick, sit the exam and then say, oh, I was sick, I want to have another go. You've got to make a choice. Are you too sick to do the exam? Get a medical certificate, apply for special consideration, and if that's accepted, you get to set the exam when you've recovered. So that's what fit to sit means. The supplementary exam is centrally timetabled, so we don't know which day it is yet. It'll be centrally timetabled. It's in the week before term 3, which is the 6th to 10th of September. If you think you need to sit this exam, make sure you're available. I'm not sure if you're in lockdown Sydney, I'm not sure why you wouldn't be available. But so the supplementary exam is for people who missed the original exam due to illness or misadventure. So there's a major power outage in your suburb for 2 days. That would be a misadventure. You're really sick. That would be illness. If you become sick in the exam or something goes wrong in the exam, it is crucial you let us know immediately via the provided email address. So I've had a heart attack. My mum's called the ambulance. All right.
My
it's crucial.
Was burned down.
Yeah. We had an exam. There was a poor student whose internet stopped working, so she was in China somewhere and was taking a bus across the city to a library she knew where she could get internet, and sending me emails every 10 minutes from the bus. That's fine. Communicate with us. She got to the library. We gave her a bit of extra time for that exam, and she finished it and passed the course.
We should be really clear, by the way. Like, I understand that exams are scary, but Andrew, me, all the other tutors, we're not trying to be mean here. So if there's something that genuinely goes wrong, we will be very helpful. We will make sure that you have a fair chance to attempt the exam, same as everybody else. Like, our number one goal here is a fair examination, which means being equally fair and nice to everyone. We don't want to be scary or evil.
On that subject, by the way, I prefer you don't put your ZID. Well, you can put your ZID if you really want in the exam. Do not put your name in the exam. I prefer tutors not to be able to see your name in the exam when they're marking. And we have your ZID, so it's not necessary to, like you do with other code, to put who you are. Commenting on code, there's no marks for commenting code. If there's some brilliant thing you're going to do, you can put a comment in, say I was about to do this brilliant thing and I was out of the 6 hours. Honestly, it almost never gets you marks. So there's no marks. I don't think we'll be doing any marking for style, but a human's got to read your code. So there's a poor tutor who's trying to read your code. So use normal indenting. Use decent variable names. If you're writing functions, use decent function names. Now, I regularly see students who frantically call their variables A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then they forget what variable C is or what variable F is, and don't finish the question. So they confuse themselves. So use normal, good style, good variable names. Use normal indenting, and you will help yourself. And if it comes to a human reading your code, you will help them. If a tutor's my instructions to tutors are, if you're faced with an incomprehensible mess, it's not your job to figure out what the code which breaks. It's not your job to, given this incomprehensible mess, to figure out what they've done in the end. It was their job to write reasonable code. So if they can see reasonable code heading towards the problem, that's marks. Incomprehensible mess that doesn't work, yeah, that's in the end, that's not marks.
I think it's worth being really clear here about why we do this. Like from a sort of philosophy of 1511 perspective, the reason we don't have style marks in the exam is because our experience is that students who have bad style get penalized just by themselves because they go back and they can't actually understand their code again, or they try and do question 6 and they just get messed up and they can't really understand things. So the reason we don't need to put style marks in the exam is because having good style will help you in and of itself. So we strongly recommend having good style. I know it feels like, it's going to take you 30 extra seconds to type out a 10 character variable name rather than a 1 character variable name, but you will make up for that time as soon as you go back to read your code again or to understand what's going on. And certainly if your marker can't read your code, I've read probably 5,000 exam submissions at this point, something like that. And of those, the ones I can remember that had really bad code, mostly I looked at them for 30 seconds, didn't understand what was going on, and you don't get the benefit of the doubt there.
I'd say, a couple more things. Style and readability are incredibly important. They're a bit hard to assess. They're more a subjective thing, so I like to have objective marking schemes. I like to have the tutor saying, I'll do this and I'll do this, and if it does this, I'll give this mark, or if it does that. So it would be a bit hard. We could do it. It's just a bit harder to do under exam conditions. Then students freak out about it, and so we say no marks for style, even though it's incredibly important. All right, a couple more things. There are a few students with 24-hour overlapping exams. Unsw exam unit says they know about this overlap, and they said, no, sorry, you've got to deal with this overlap. I think it's okay. The other 24-hour exams are saying, no, you don't need the whole 24 hours. We're saying you don't even need the whole 6 hours, so I think this is okay. Exams units have done a good job, so there's only a couple of students that I know about in this category. If you've got a morning exam, by the way, there's a few more students with a morning exam. Make sure you eat relaxed, maybe take a short walk between the exams, make sure you get your blood sugar up, get yourself ready to do the exam. Do we scale marks? Yes, if we stuff up and set an exam that's too hard, we will scale the marks up to a normal distribution. So
it's worth noting that, to my knowledge, and Andrew might correct me here, we haven't scaled marks in 1511 in the last 3 years, at least the time I've been teaching. So, in theory, could we scale marks? Yes, but only in the case where we really stuffed up the exam if we needed to change stuff like that. In general, we don't scale marks because generally we have a sensible distribution that accurately reflects what people's experience in the course was.
Will we scale down? I haven't had to scale exam marks down ever. And Tom's saying, 1511 hasn't stuffed up ever in the last 3 years. That may be true, but I think 4 years ago I might have had to scale marks up because I set the too hard exam. But I guess that gives you a track record. The last time a mistake was made and the exam was made a bit hard is about 4 years ago. By the way, a too hard exam, the crucial thing is, as Tom said, an exam is fair. So if we set a too hard exam, it's still fair. It's too hard for everyone, but we just want to ensure that you get an appropriate distribution of grades, so we scale it up. But for this course, we're pretty practiced, so the exam difficulty should be okay. And repeat, no marks for style. We gave you a long justification, but there's no marks for style. But if you don't use good style, you'll confuse yourself. And if your style is horrible and the human marker's trying to read your code and see if you've done, they'll sort of have 4 things to solve the problem. And you're saying, have you solved A? I'll give you this mark. B, this mark. If your style is horrible, they might not be able to understand that you've actually solved A and B and are halfway to solving the problem. So decent style, definitely indenting. I've seen students not indent, and it doesn't end well for them, but decent variable names as well. But you don't have to add comments. All right, questions, Tom? Anything else we should cover about the exam?
People with ELS adjustments. When we send out the email to everyone a few days before the exam, one of the things that will be on that email is if you've got an ELS adjustment, it will say so. And then there'll be specific instructions in that about how that's different. Mainly it's just that there might be extra time or other considerations applied. But yes, you don't need to email us specifically about them.
So you should get email before the exam. So there's ELS. I think they've changed their name again, but it's the part of university, the Equitable Learning Services, I think is what they were before. And a few students have arrangements with Equitable Learning, and we implement those. So if you have ELS conditions, we implement those. You should get email from us saying, oh yeah, we're doing this for you because this is what Equitable Learning said. If you don't get that email, you can email us at CS1511, but not now. If it's the day before the exam and you haven't heard from us, by all means.
That email will go out probably on the Monday before the exam, just so it's recent in your inbox. It'll just say, here's the link to the exam, it won't work yet, and then if there's any extra conditions on your exam, it will include those. So if you don't get that by the Monday. Yeah,
so if it's Tuesday afternoon and you haven't got an email saying, we're doing this for your exam because you've registered with ELS, you can get in touch with us.
And if you're really, really worried about it, email CS1511, but it will get applied. We've got the list of everybody who's got those.
It's not impossible they've left someone off the list. That has happened in the past. But you should. We can always fix it. We can even fix it we can even fix it on the day during the exam. So that's even after the exam we can fix it. But we can fix anything and have at times.
There's another question there about which I'll answer quickly before I realise that it's 11 o'clock. There are features that the style guide advises you to avoid, given you aren't marked for style, or those features on the table. So there are some features which you will just not be able to compile or auto test. The ones that it says 1511 does not allow these things, you won't be able to use. So that's like
go to.
In fact, I'm not even going to say the names of those things because you don't know about them. But if you try and do something that doesn't compile, that won't work. But certainly, if there are features that we've said, hey, we don't recommend that you use them, you can use them, but there's a reason why we've said don't use them. It's not that we're just evil, capricious beings who want to, cause you suffering. Things like pointer arithmetic, as was mentioned, the reason we don't suggest them is because they will cause you more pain than good, and because we get lots of students who come in, well, some students who say, oh, I actually, I understand this thing perfectly, I understand how it's going to work, they'll use it, they actually don't understand it, and then they get marked down for it. So there are reasons why we suggest the things we do, but you wouldn't get style marks down for it. You might get penalized if you implement it incorrectly.
All right. Sorry, this lecture's been a bit chaotic with my setup crashing beforehand and one or two other issues. So you will be able to ask questions about the exam at the start of Thursday's lecture. We'll go through revision. We'll revise the course content. So I'm anticipating we'll spend 10 minutes answering further questions about the exam at the start of Thursday's lecture, and then we'll go through revision topics after that. All right, thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for tuning in. Please don't panic about the exam. It will turn out okay. A huge thank you for Tom for tuning in today, and we'll get Tom to tune in Thursday when we're talking about the exam, for at least while we're talking about the exam. All right, so I'll see you all on Thursday.